Hello and welcome back to Brawler Bios. I'm your host Brian, also known as Malorian, and this here is the podcast it's all about Warmachine, but more specifically, it's all about Brawlmachine. And so what I mean by that is the 25-point format made up by the folks there of Line of Sight. Fantastic format, and the way that we take it on here is we take a caster every 2 weeks, we break it down so we can understand what the rules are, we talk about a potential list, and then we get into the fun part, which is grading it on some different levels that we're going to be comparing it to other casters. So for today, we're going to be moving over to Crix, and we are going to be talking about Bane Witch Agathia. Now, Bane Witch Agathia is like I said, a Crix Warcaster. It is Focus 7, it is Speed 6, Strength 6, Mat 7, which is, alright I guess. A Rat 4, but has no gun, so who cares? Defense 15, Armor 15, Command 9, and it's undead. So, okay, that's a nice rule to have sometimes. Sometimes you have something where it's only affecting living models, so it's usually a good thing to be undead. And then to finish off the stats, it has 16 boxes and 29 Warjack points. Now, when we look into what weapons Agathia has, it's really only the one there. It is a melee weapon. Sorry, I've been calling it melee, and people have been really mad about that. I guess I should be calling it melee. So I'm just going to call it combat, so I don't mess it up anymore. But our one combat weapon is going to be Death Kiss. It has a range of 2 and a P+S of 12. Magical weapon. So nothing really fancy there. She does have, though, however, a whole bunch of special rules. There is tons on the back of this card. So the very first one here is going to be Apparition. And what Apparition says is, during your control phase, place this model anywhere completely within 2 inches of its current location. So that is definitely a lot of interesting things you could be doing with that. You could be using that to be moving out of engagement so you can get away. You can be using that to get some extra threat distance. And it's really something where, I can be like hopping outside of a building and then getting an opening. Or maybe I was hiding behind a cloud or a forest. Now I can pop into it to get line of sight. So it's a really good thing to have that little bit of mobility before you even activate anything. You're also going to have Death Shroud. So what this says is, while in this model's command range, enemy models suffer -2 strength. So that's a pretty interesting thing to have on there. It kind of wants her to get up there and be a little bit dangerous, but that might be where she's going to get herself in trouble. So maybe not the best thing to be doing. She also has Ghostly, though, so this model can advance through terrain and obstacles without penalty and can advance through obstructions if it has enough movement to move completely past them, and also can't be targeted with any free strikes. So we talked about how that 2 inches can be nice to be de-engaged. Well, she can't be engaged anyway. So that's pretty nice to have if you need to run away, whatever it needs. It's nice to not have that. But the main thing there is that part where you can just be moving through terrain. We had talked about where it's nice where you can be placing to the side so you can be hiding behind a building and then like sneaking around it. Well, she can actually just move right through buildings, doesn't go half speed, doesn't get stopped by walls or anything like that, just goes right through it. She also has Henchmen, so this is for a small-based Bane unit, and what it says is choose one friendly small-based Bane unit at the beginning of the game to be Henchmen. The chosen unit gains +2 defense and mat and apparition. So this is a hell of a thing that's really going to be changing the way that we want to be building this caster. Obviously, if one of your units can be getting +2 defense, +2 mat, and is also going to be getting that nice little 2-inch place, well, how do you not do that? That's definitely something you want to play into, especially at this small point level. But let's read a little bit more here, which is nice, where it has Irregular's Bane Knight. Bane Knights units can be included in any army that also includes Bane Witch Agathia. So if you are worried about that first part, we're like, well, I guess that even locks us into a theme because we have to go into a theme with Banes. Well, because of this Irregulars rule, you can be taking at least those Bane Knights in any sort of list that you want. So that makes it a lot more open, where you can be going wherever you want to go with it. The last rule on the back here, there's been a lot. We're now on the 6th rule on the back of this card, is going to be Soul Taker and Cull Soul. So what this says is this model can gain soul tokens when a living enemy model is destroyed within 2 inches of this model. This model gains the destroyed model's soul. So again, it's kind of encouraging Agathia to get up there, get around living models, and then be able to get their souls. Because, I mean, obviously these things are going to be used on following turns like focus. And so in order to do that, you have to go up there and get it. In fact, I didn't finish the entire rule here. After this model replenishes its focus during your next control phase, replace each soul token with 1 focus point. So that's what I mean by that. It wants to load up on souls. And next turn, I mean, 7 focus is pretty solid, but anything above that is just wonderful. But again, you have to kind of get her in danger in order to even do that. All right, the rules as far as her spells go, she has a good number of spells. First one here is going to be Ghost Walk. It is a cost 2, range 6, and what it is target friendly faction model or unit gains Ghostly for 1 turn. And again, we already heard that Ghostly allows you to advance through terrain, blah, 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 no free strikes. So not only does she have this, she could be putting this on something else in her army as well. And this can be one of those very tricky things where, you know, on a caster like Agathia, that's not really a very aggressive one, that doesn't really, I mean, all the rules says she wants to be in combat, but she doesn't really have the weapons to really back it up. If you do this to a Jack or something like that, well, all of a sudden where they might thought they were safe because they were behind a building, there's terrain in the way, whatever it was, or that you probably didn't want to eat all those free strikes, well, now, no, you can just do that and just go right through these things. So a very nice gotcha spell to have if nothing else. The next one here is going to be Hellfire, and what Hellfire is a cost 3, range 10, power 14 offensive spell, and it says models disabled by Hellfire cannot make a tough roll. Models boxed by Hellfire are removed from play. So, I mean, the whole thing there where you're removing from play and no tough, sure, there might be the slight time that comes up, but usually this is going to be a fairly expensive spell that you can be casting if it ever comes up. I mean, again, you're having to pay 3 for it, probably having to boost to hit depending on what you're going for, likely going to be boosting damage. So in oftentimes this is going to be a 5 focus play, so it better be something really good where you're killing off a solo or crippling a system that's going to be stopping a heavy or something like that. Alright, the next spell that she's going to have is Hellrot. It is a cost 2, range 6, upkeep spell, and it is target Warjack in this spellcaster's battle group gains +2 armor and retaliation. And what retaliation is if a model retaliation was damaged by an enemy attack during the last round, during your maintenance phase, it can advance 3 inches and make 1 basic melee attack. I'm going to want to call it melee forever. Sorry, guys. I know I'm going to mess it up again at some point. But anyway, this is just basically vengeance on one of your jacks. So not a bad thing to do when it also is going to be getting +2 armor as well. I mean, we had already talked about where with her other ability, she has a little bit of an armor skew going on, kind of. Where again, the models within her command range are going to be -2 strength, which really means that whatever they're attacking is basically +2 armor. So in total here, this is now a switch of 4 armor if you wanted on one of your Warjack. So something to keep in mind if you want to get a little bit, you know, janky with it. The next one here is going to be a powerhouse of a spell, which is Parasite. It is a cost 3, range 8 upkeep spell, and what it says is target model unit suffers -3 armor, and the spellcaster gains 1 armor. So you know, it's nice that Agathia will go up to armor 16 with this, but the main thing is that this is just destroys armor on the other side, right? Dropping it down by 3, pretty fantastic. And then the last one she has on the card here is going to be Vanish. It is a cost 1 self spell, and it is place the spellcaster anywhere completely within 3 inches of its current location. Vanish can only be cast once per activation. So because of these things, you really get to move Agathia all over the place here. And there's nothing saying on this, you know, it has to be done at the end of activation, or after this you can't move, or anything like that. So what that really means is that before you move or anything like that, you could apparate up 2 inches, you could then vanish up another 3 inches, and really be adding 5 inches to that threat they could be basically putting on her. I mean, you could be completely behind a building, and between these 5 inches, now be completely around on the other side. Again, remember that even though she has Ghostly, you would not be able to be using that movement to go through the building unless those pieces of that movement took you completely through it. So it's not like you can just completely use those 5 inches to go all the way through. But I mean, otherwise, you can be, moving 2 inches over here to get around this building, moving up, casting the spell, now moving another 3 inches back to safety. There's a lot of interesting movement shenanigans you can be doing with this. So again, it's cheap, it's nice, it's something you can always have in your back pocket whenever you really need it. Now, her feat is going to be Shadowfall, and what it is that friendly faction model units currently in Agathia's control range are affected by Ghost Walk. So she's all about the Ghost Walk. She has it, a spell can put it out, and her feat put it out as well. While in Agathia's control range, friendly faction models gain stealth. So okay, that's a great defensive part of the feat. And then additionally, when a model in Agathia's battle group ends its activation in her control range, you can immediately place that model anywhere completely within 3 inches of its location. And then of course it lasts for 1 round. So there's a lot of things you could be doing with this feat. I mean, when you first look at it, it's not a powerhouse feat. It's not saying that you are going to double damage or get double the shots or your armor is going up 5. It's nothing like that. But there's a lot of very interesting things you could be doing with it. For example, maybe this is a defensive feat that you're going to go up and before you actually get in, you're going to pop it just to make sure that your entire army has stealth and is not going to be shot on the approach. I mean, depending on what you're going against, that could be actually very critical to staying alive. Well, another thing you'd be using with this as well is that Ghost Walk. As we kind of said, there'll be times where your opponent thinks they're safe because of terrain, whether it's, some rubble in the way or an absolute building, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to cast this, I'm going to get Ghost Walk, and zoom, I'm going to be going all the way through. Maybe even for the portion where it's going to be saying the no free strikes, where all of a sudden, like normally they feel like, okay, you're not going to be charging through my infantry to my heavies because you don't want to be taking any free strikes. Well, you pop this and you're just running right by them and saying, I don't care, I'm just going to get to those heavies in the back and you're not going to be hitting me. Again, though, there's also that last piece where you get that 3-inch move with your battle group at the end of their activation. And so kind of like how we just said for Agathia, where she could go in there, do something, and then move 3 inches back to safety with a spell. Well, this is in addition to that. So for Agathia herself, if she really wants to try and get up there 1 turn, this is 6 inches she can be moving back after. So go up, pop feet, charge in, I'm going to be doing whatever I can, get all those tasty souls, then I'll cast my spell to go 3 inches back, and then my activation ends, and I got to go another 3 inches back as well. As far as the rest of your battle group, I mean, again, your heavies could be going in and then going back 3 inches. Maybe it's also a thing where you're moving 3 inches to the side. If you're needing to go after something that's tough and 1 heavy is not going to be enough and there's not enough real estate there for you to get multiple heavies in, well, the first one goes in, does what damage it can, and then moves 3 inches out of the way, knowing that it can't even take a free strike, and then opening up a charge lane for the next one to be coming through. So again, this is not one of those feats where it's just an absolute powerhouse. It's going to be destroying things. However, at the same time, I kind of felt like, well, there's a lot of interesting things you can do here. All right, so with that, let's now move on and actually look at what's a potential list that you could be building with Agathia. And I think, again, part of this kind of already builds itself, right? We're only dealing with 25 points, and we already kind of know that we want to be having a max unit of some sort of Banes in there to be really taking advantage of that henchman rule. Now, with that, we could actually be going to the Bane theme and just trying to do more with it, but again, remember, she can at least take those Bane Knights in any other theme that we want. And so with that in mind, I decided that I wanted to go with Black Industries. Now, the reason why I want to go with this theme is partially because your jacks are going to be getting that extra armor coming in. I've seen quite a bit here where there's a lot of range things coming into Brawlmachine where they want to be trying to take you down from far away. And even though you do have the ability, like we said, with the feat to be getting stealth, well, especially now that they're starting to add objectives into Brawlmachine, that means they're going to have outs for that. Plus, I found that a lot of people had outs for stealth anyway. So I feel like if there's something more there to really make my jacks a little bit more scary. That's probably the way that I wanted to be leaning with this. I also thought about trying to use a little bit more of the ambush or something like that, but in the end, kind of decided against it. So what I end up with the list then is I'm going to be having Bane Witch Agathia. She is going to be having a Slayer and a Seether and a Death Ripper. And the reason for that battle group is that I basically just want to have cheap things that I know can hit above their weight class. Because I'm going to be able to go and put Parasite on something and lower down its armor, I just want to be able to take advantage of that by taking the most attacks possible. So overall, I mean, it would be nice to be taking some Jack that has super high armor. You know, if there was something in Crix that was like the Centurion that I could be layering on that armor that we were talking about, that'd be nice, but it simply doesn't really exist. So that's not something I can really take. Obviously, I can be putting that armor spell on the Seether, and that means if it does take a hit, you know, like it'd always be countercharging in. It might take one sort of hit, and then I can back up, setting myself the charge back in again. So again, not a perfect thing to use with that spell, but again, I'm playing more to the Parasite. Otherwise, the one free thing I wanted to take was the Hellslinger Phantom. I mean, a 7-point solo is pretty good. You know, when we're looking at just 25 points, if my free thing can be 7, that's fantastic. And I don't really have anything else in here that's going to be a lot of shooting. So anything like that can be putting on the pressure at the 4 shots per turn, whether I'm lighting things on fire, shooting through things, whatever. Really nice thing to have to kind of like force it. And of course, I need to have at least one solo anyway. The one unit I did take that was the Banes, I went with the actual Bane Knights with the UA, and so with that makes them really scary. Because for those who don't know how its actual UA works, it actually has Serpent's Coil, and what you can do is use this once per game as a mini feat, and it's going to be having Defensive Strike, and this makes them really scary. I mean, you can imagine that if a model wanted to be charging into them, Defensive Strike was going to be scary already, that they might be taking some serious damage. However, if we now say on top of that they're going to be +2 mat, and you won't even hit them because they're +2 defense, you know, that's the type of thing where now they're really starting to second guess these things. And if the target is something that you've already tagged with Parasite, yeah, this is really not going to be going their way. So that's going to be eating up a lot of my points. And then the last points, I put in some Carrion Thralls. Again, I want to use something that can take advantage of me using Parasite on there. I'm guessing that between the defensive strikes and other attacks that my Bane Knights will be going in and doing some damage. So a unit that has Finisher, fantastic. It can be going in there and doing some really hard work. So really what the goal of the list is then is really to lean on those Bane Knights, really trying to get up the table and position them up in a spot where maybe on the approach, I'm going to be using the feat to first say, okay, you can't shoot me. I'm staying out of your charge range. I don't have a lot here that threats out very far. Again, the apparition on the Bane Knights helps, but I mean, things can threat very far. So if I can't get that alpha, I can then position myself with those Bane Knights in front. I can pop my mini feat and say, all right, come on if you want. And then after that, I'm all set up with my heavies and my Carrion Thralls behind them. And I mean, even if I want to, the Carrion Thralls could be charging in, clearing the way, and then repoing back behind, then charge in further with the Bane Knights. It's really going to be more, though, a centralized force, and so depending on what type of scenario you see, if it is one that's wide, it would be suffering there, but I do think it really kind of takes advantage of what she's trying to do generally. So anyway, I thought it'd be a pretty interesting way to go. Alright, so with all that out of the way now, let's move on to the next part of this podcast, which is the grading. This is where we're going to be looking at the answers that this caster has, the questions, its personal output, and then we're going to be looking at how good is it for new players and how good is it for experienced players. So for the first one here, let's look at the answers. What type of things does Agatha have that says, all right, if I see these things on the board, I can answer them? Well, the very first one we can say there is that Parasite. That Parasite is a fantastic spell to have. It really means that if we can see high armor, we can really scale that down very quickly. We can also say that she has an answer to defensive skews as well, because she does have that the henchmen that are going to be getting the +2 mat, although we do have to realize that is going to be very limited, right? This is going to be onto one unit only. I can't switch this around, and if my opponent takes that unit out, well, then that's going to be kind of it. The other thing I do have answers to, though, is terrain. Basically, I don't give two shits about terrain whatsoever. If I am up against an opponent that can be putting down, walls or rubble or whatever it is, I don't care. Or maybe I just see that on the table itself. So again, that's something that is not always going to be there, but it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket. Otherwise, that's really it. There's not really a lot of other large things in here. So I think all I can do after all this is done and said is really leave this as a basic C. You'd really think that something like having the good old Parasite would be pushing it forward, but there's just not really much any past this. The other thing I guess we didn't talk about too is the armor skew. We did mention that. I should actually mention it now here at the grading. And so if in the future they do have something that's like super tanky and you can really be pushing up that armor, that's also something you can be doing. But I think in order to really push that, you have to be playing in a very poor way where Agathia is up there getting in trouble, and probably more likely you'll just end up them saying like, well, it's so hard to kill their Jax, I'm just going to kill your caster. So it's probably not going to be the best way to actually try and do it. All right, the next thing we're going to be giving a grade on is the questions. What are the things that Agathia is doing that's saying, well, you better have an answer for this or you're going to be in trouble? Well, I guess one of the things you could be saying for this is that whole part of the having the ghostly, right? If you can't answer my ghostly and I'm really going to be positioning myself so that I can be on the other side of forest or whatever it is so that I'm going to be guaranteeing myself the alpha, well, that's a pretty great thing to have there. Maybe I can also be saying with that free strike part, right? That if you were really hoping to hold me back and jam me and all those types of things, like especially if I build a list that has a lot more flying units, well, I can just be flying over you and not caring and hitting the things I actually want to be hitting. So that's kind of it there. But as far as trying to ask questions, again, if we're asking the question with having the high armor or something like that, like that's just not going to happen. We're just going to get ourselves in trouble. So I really find this lacking. I think I'm going to give this one a D+. It's really doesn't have a lot there, unfortunately. The next thing I'm going to be talking about here is personal output. Now, again, it seems like you really want to do this, right? You look at the card and she wants to charge in there and kill a bunch of infantry and then move back 6 inches and be safe, and next turn have like basically like 14 focus or something crazy like that. But really, that's not going to happen a whole bunch of the time, especially when we're talking about that normally when Agathia really has to get in there will be in the late game, is when normally a caster has to really push its weight around. You might see a solo and get 1 soul from that. She's only POW 12. Sure, she's MAT 7, but this is not really a good thing here either. And so again, I think I'm going to be going down for a somewhere around that D-. It just really isn't there for her personal output. And I think if you ever try and do it, that's where you're going to be getting yourself in trouble. All right, next one here is going to be, what's the grade for a new player? If I had a new player come to me and said, Brian, I just picked up the Crick starter set. I'm going to be playing Agathia in the next Brawlmachine event. Is this a good thing for them? And I think that it's okay. I mean, the reason why I say that is that they're probably going to enjoy the movement shenanigans and how it can move around. It's going to be nice that, a new player doesn't have to worry about terrain too much. I know that's one of the things that can actually throw off new players, where they're like, what do you mean I can't charge over that wall? It's like a little tiny hedge. What do you mean I can't just like rush through this forest and get to the other side, or whatever it is? Or you just slightly positioned wrong and there's like a building clipping your side so you can't charge at the angle you want. Well, this is something that answers that. But again, there's not going to be that much there. And I think what you're going to be finding more so is that things like, oh man, I forgot to do the apparition on either her henchman or herself. And you're like, oh, can I go back? Can I be doing this? Or, like, how can I actually be trying to use this to get much from it? Okay, I probably want to charge in there and try and get some souls. And then they're going to be frustrated when they either like, hey, I want to try to go in there and take out a heavy or an Archon, and she just didn't have what it takes to make it happen, or then she just dies. And so I think this will be a frustrating caster to be playing for a new player, something where they might start off with it and be like, oh, this is kind of fun, but at the same time, run into that frustration. So unfortunately, again, with this one here, I'd be putting this one down as a D. I would not be suggesting this one for a new player, for a new Crix player. Well, what if we're talking about an experienced player? What if somebody's coming in here and they have all the knowledge, like, yeah, let's do this. I can know how to use everything from her card to really pull out all the advantage I have. What are we going to be looking at this here? And I think when we get to that point there, we're probably looking at like a C+. I mean, you could be doing some interesting things here where taking a lot of jacks, and because this experienced player knows how to keep her safe while still protecting the jacks, you might be able to do a bit of this armor ball thing and actually make it work. Or maybe going with the whole ghostly and making it so you're not taking free strikes. So whether you're taking flying stuff and flying and hitting whatever you need, knowing that you're not going to be taking free strikes, or maybe with that same armor ball, you're just trampling all over the place, and knowing that normally when you trample, you're taking a couple of free strikes along the way. Now that's not going to be happening, and maybe they can get some bonus from that. But again, it's a little bit more jank than actually powerful. There's some things, like we said, Parasite, which is very nice to have on there, but it'd be very difficult to try and use this and be like, yeah, I'm going to take this and I'm going to crush that Brawlmachine event. So with that, there's a lot of not that great grades on this caster, and I do feel bad coming out here because I want to be hurrah, hurrah, go Brawlmachine. You can do anything, you can have lots of fun. And I think with that is kind of true. I'm pretty sure that if you're a person that has some experience, if it's not your first caster, if you want to challenge, this would be a one you can go there and try and be like, okay, I'm not going to use one of the usual Crix casters. I want to be trying something different. And then you'll be having fun with how mobile they are and the different challenges that this caster proposes. But just, I got to be honest, when it comes to like a new player, or if you're trying to win an event, I still don't feel like Agathia is the way to go. And of course, I don't want to discourage anyone who, there's a viewer out there that, hey, they got that stutter box, they got Agathia, they got that unit of Banes, and they're just ready to go and rock it with Brawlmachine. You know what? That's fantastic. That's amazing. That's what we'd like to see. But hey, this is a grading podcast, and sometimes some casters get lower grades. So either way, that is our show for today. If you disagree, if you have any other thoughts, please, as always, I always welcome your feedback, and otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.